afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As you can hear, the village dogs are barking again, which makes a change. We've just had a slight snowfall, but it's since melted, but it was quite pretty for a little bit. Today I want to talk about axes. Now, I quite often receive emails from people asking me what sort of axe do I suggest, and it's always a difficult question to answer because it depends on which task you need the axe for. Also, my answer is generally not what was expected. We'll start today with probably the most commonly used and commonly known form of axe, the hatchet. These are two variations on the common hatchet. This type is the cheap hardware store hatchet. It's very cheap and sold universally, obviously in slightly different sizes and styles, but it's the universal cheap hatchet. This style comes with some form of man-made handle. It has a nice grip and a much heavier head, much heavier. However, the hatchet is used normally for making kindling for the fire. But in this case, I discovered that neither of these are much use. This one has way too thin a profile. It would be more useful for actually chopping than splitting. So this one very quickly retired. This one has a very strange blade profile, and I have a feeling this is more designed as a brick axe. It's very heavy and almost impossible to sharpen. It's no use whatsoever for chopping, and it's no use for kindling making. I think this really is for bricks, even though it's sold as a hatchet. And my god, it is heavy on the forearm. Really heavy. Not well balanced at all. This axe is it's Czech made by Xteen, and this is a modern all-round axe, very similar to the Fiskars line of camp axes. This is somewhat larger than a hatchet, and as you can see, its head profile is more of a splitting axe. This, I find, it has completely man-made handle, but this I find extremely useful, including the hammerhead on the back. I really like this. After many years of doing the hatchet thing, this suits my purpose as well. Plus, I don't like small axes, especially the new style of camp axes, which come to about here. And for me, these are less than useless. I don't know what you're supposed to do with them. If you're chopping that small pieces of wood, you might as well just throw the wood in the fire. Now we come to the axe that most people expect me to choose. This is my Hultafors Classic, beautiful axe. I've reviewed this in an earlier video. On days like today, when it's sleeting, this axe is extremely slippy and cold to the touch. Beautiful axe, nice blade profile, but it's I'd rather keep this as an ornamental piece than a functional piece. Although many outdoorsmen would ridicule me for that because they think it's what they're supposed to have. One positive thing about this style of axe compared to the modern style is that this can be rehafted theoretically in the forest, although in reality that's not going to happen because you need to age the stave. You need to shape it and then age it. You can rehaft at home. I have an axe I'll show in a minute which I've probably rehafted 3 times over the years, so that is one benefit to it. I mean, it is well balanced, it's beautiful. I just wish it had a better grip. I could put Ranger bands on it, inner tube tyre, to make it more grippable, but I almost feel guilty for using that. This one, they're quite economical compared to the Scandinavian versions. This, I don't mind whacking away at wood. If it breaks, I'll buy a new one. It's not cheap. It's above your average hardware store price, but it's that I'd cry if I broke it. That one, I'll wait a month and buy another one. So, moving up in size, we come to the felling axe. Now, it's got a very thin blade profile, and as you can see, I've had to rehaft this several times and actually carve down new hafts to fit into the head. This did me well for years. It's specifically for chopping trees. That's what it's for. This size, I think, traditionally would be called a boy's axe. It's not a full-size felling axe, which would be about that big and much bigger blade. But this, if I was going to move to the north of Alaska and rely on a tool, this is about the size of axe I would take. I would use this size for kindling, for carving a log cabin, for producing firewood. This size. I wouldn't mess around with hatchets. I wouldn't even look at camp axes. And a felling axe is just too big to carry around. This is the ideal size. However, this is only a felling axe, and the main function I require an axe for is splitting, not felling. It's not very often where you actually need to fell a tree with an axe. I have a chainsaw for that one, a Dolmar petrol chainsaw. This, for splitting, is useless because it gets stuck in the wood, and you don't want that. because you spend most of your time with your foot on the wood trying to free it. But that is the right size. This beast has a 2 kilogram head. And this beast, obviously it's getting close to being needing to be rehafted again. This is my go-to axe for virtually everything, including kindling. This is, I think, a German style splitting axe, which is what these sort of flares are for, because it pushes the wood apart when it goes down. Plus it's 2 kilograms head, which means the force of this axe drives through the wood with ease. It's also quite easy to sharpen, even though it does have a slight elliptical blade pattern. It is sharp and it will go through kindling quite easily. But again, if I was going into the forest for a long period, I probably wouldn't take this because it's so heavy. For my lifestyle here, my sort of quasi off-grid self-reliant lifestyle, this is ideal. This is my go-to axe. I'd recommend it to anyone. But for bushcraft, wilderness living, it's way too heavy. It really is. And I can't imagine chopping a tree with this. You'd be exhausted after half an hour. But that's my... If I could suggest, I mean, even the back I've used as a hammer multiple times. If I could suggest one axe to have at home, if you rely on wood, on firewood, it would be a splitting axe like this. The other main type of axe I use quite often, living out here, is the pickaxe. This is a small version. I have a much bigger version in the garage. And I use this often. I used it last week, 2 weeks ago, to make a drainage ditch so the water can pass by my kitchen door because of the amount of rain. It's got a new haft on it, so it actually looks quite clean. But a pickaxe is essential. It's dirty, it's rusted, but there's no point in cleaning pickaxes because they just get dirty again. That is an essential item. If I was aiming to spend some time in the wilderness, like years, I would definitely take a pickaxe as well as a boy's axe. But I'd probably take a pickaxe with a pickaxe blade and probably an adze blade, or even a mattock blade, something like that, a hoe, mattock, another function. This is very good for breaking rock. Maybe you could do some old school gold mining with it. Modern tactical axes. Both of these qualify as throwing axes. This one is more of a tactical bushcraft sort of style axe, and this is more of a like a medieval replica, miniaturized as a throwing axe. It has 3 sharp bits which will stick into wood. This one, this actually has a blade profile which could be used as a hatchet. Paracord wrapped. I don't like paracord handles, I really don't. I get the function of them, plus you have your cordage, but I prefer a more solid handle than a paracord handle. Now, this thing I'd say is more of a self-defense weapon or a throwing knife, a throwing axe. At a pinch you could use it to chop kindling, but I wouldn't rely on that. That's not doing anything. Okay, here. This one, it's too thin a blade pattern, there's no weight in it, and it really is just a throwing tool. But I keep it as a memento. I wouldn't take that to the bush with me, no way. Now we come to this beauty. I'm not entirely sure what this is. This part of the blade, the beard, I would say is a goosewing broadhead, probably a hewing axe for squaring logs for shipbuilding or cabin building. This part, which is some sort of hammer, I have no idea what that is, and I've never found a similar version, and I've searched. If anybody knows what this is specifically, I'd be really, really happy to know. I found this in the Baltic, and it is historic. This is a very, very old axe head. But what specifically it's for, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe shipbuilding or cabin building, but this thing, it's just peculiar. Normally if it was a hammer, it'd come out the back. So I really don't know what that is, but nice sexy bit of history. Please, if you know, tell me in the comments. Let me know. I really, really would like to know what it is. For those of you who've seen my film Leshy, you may recognise this axe. I actually wrote an extensive article on it for Bushcraft magazine several years ago, which you can still purchase online. This is the Slovak shepherd's axe. In Slovak it's called the valaška, and traditionally this is what shepherds plus the most famous bandit in this area of Europe carried, and his name was Janušik. So it functioned as a walking stick, which I used as such for years, and it also functioned as a fighting axe for defense and for fighting. For chopping, it's not very useful. The head is way too small. Traditional Slovak versions often have very ornate, miniature bearded heads, similar to Viking axes. They're quite often made of brass or bronze as well, which suggests it was more of a defensive weapon than a utilitarian one. Often they have very carved staves, but one important difference between the valaška and the traditional axe stave is the valaška has an oblong shaped stave. Normal axes are elliptoid or oval. Never round. Never buy a round axe because that just slips. But traditionally these were oblong. So, the valaška. Okay, my final recommendations. What do I personally suggest for an axe? For those who've been using axes for years, I'm sure you already know your own personal choice, what fits your lifestyle best, because it's the lifestyle which determines the axe type. However, if I could suggest, can you hear the eagle? An eagle flying around in a snowstorm. Size-wise, the boy's axe for wilderness living and bushcraft. But I would suggest going with a modern type axe. I really would. Many years have been spent on research and development on the ergonomics of axe use. Don't get a cheap one, but you don't need to spend a fortune either. Get a mid-range modern axe about that size. That size should do most people for bushcraft or for wilderness expeditions. It's quite light, and because it's ergonomically designed, it does its job extremely well, and you could use this for hours. Keep away from the felling axe type because it limits the possibilities of what you can use it for. But I'd recommend modern type, even that size, perhaps a little bit bigger, maybe about here. I've seen some modern axes now with a slight curve, and this greatly increases the effectivity of the swing. But for me, that's my go-to axe. Please though, if you are inexperienced with axes, be aware they are very dangerous objects. I have several scars from axe use, and there are a few items of clothing I'd really suggest wearing when you use an axe. Never use an axe when you're wearing flip-flops or Crocs or something. Always wear steel toe cap boots. When you're swinging an axe again and again and again, it's very easy to lose concentration and your mind starts slipping. In one of those slips, the axe continues to swing and goes through your foot, causing irreparable damage. Quite often, if wood is knotted and fresh, the axe will actually bounce back. So be aware, it can come straight back into your face. Wear gloves until your hands get used to using an axe, because they will blister. Mind people around you. Never use an axe if anybody is around you. Not only can the axe fly off, the head can fly off, but more importantly, the wood, when you cut it, can go all over the place. And someone can get hit in the head with a flying chunk of wood. Never cut or chop with overhanging branches, because the axe can get stuck. Just be careful. An axe is not a toy. I remember years back when I think I was still a cub scout, when they used to have gradings where you learned different tools before you could use them. And I think you had hatchet and penknife, and then boy's axe, then sheath knife, and then felling axe. You worked your way up through the different tools and you learned how to use them. You know, it's very different using a hatchet to using a two-handed, 2-kilo splitting axe. It's completely different body movements. Watch your fingers, and these things will sever fingers very, very easily. So, wear the right clothes, learn safety precautions, and take it slow. And, as always, be free.